Welcome to the RSP Film Room. I'm Matt Waldman, and joining me today is Brandon Angelo. If you know him as Angelo Analysis or FF Angelo, if you see him on Twitter. Brandon, it's been a long time coming. I'm really excited to meet you and do this show with you.
Yeah, no, I am too. I really loved their call a couple weeks ago. But I'm really excited to jump on with you and talk some of these prospects for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So for folks who may be kind of like not on Twitter or kind of stuck in their own little corner or niche of whatever analysis they follow, I know a lot of folks follow you and admire the work that you do. Certainly, I've seen great work from you. I just wanted to know, tell
Sure.
people about how you got into this, about your background, and kind of the angles of how you look at this at football in general.
Sure, yeah. For first, I was a collegiate athlete. I was a track and field athlete. That was kind of where I started the film watching, which is watching myself. So just going to my coach's office and slowing things down on film, talking about angles of operation and things that I need to do better as an athlete to compete at the highest level I could compete at. And that's where I first started. And then I started my career in sport and human performance when I got out of college. And that's really when I started working with other athletes and coaches to slow things down for them, which was a big difference. So looking at like GPS data, that's one thing. Last week, it was funny. I was looking at GPS data of a football team and kind of seeing, the velocity decrements and things like that we talk about, from guys with GPS data of prospects. So looking at it from that lens was really interesting. But that's what I do on a day-to-day basis. So I'm a giant nerd. So I just break down data, film, and combine like analytics from like a sports science perspective too, to kind of make decisions training wise for athletes and coaches. But then also, review that film so I can make decisions, for myself to kind of put programs together and, help our athletes and coaches out.
Well, this should be fascinating because it seems like the angles that we're going to be talking about today. I mean, we'll talk about their technical skills and we'll talk about
Sure.
those things, but it certainly seems like that we'll be talking a lot about movement and different aspects of movement, with these athletes. And we've picked some fun ones who really capture, a lot of what we talk about when we're looking at top athletes and what makes top football players, and so we've each picked three players to look at. So we're going to look at six today. Who are the three that you picked?
So I picked Traylon Burks, Keontae Ingram, and Malik Willis. Those are the three I picked.
Yeah, and I love those picks, and I have to laugh because I knew Brandon and I were gonna have fun when we were getting to know each other, and Brandon's like, I wanted to be Maurice Clarett when I
Yeah.
was in high school. And
Yep.
I was like, there we go, a fellow running back nerd right
Love it.
there. Yeah. So I would have picked Keontae Ingram myself if Brandon hadn't. So I was glad for that. So I picked Tyrion Davis Price, Khalil
Nice.
Shakir, and Trey McBride. And so I thought we'd get a chance to kind of cover the spectrum here and do that. So we're gonna get started. For those of you who aren't familiar with the RSP Film Room, we generally just we're looking at tape throughout the process, rewinding, slowing down, talking about all the little nuances that we can spy here, and and we'll just nerd out over it. So that's what we're gonna do. I'm gonna share the screen, and we're gonna start. Who do you want to start with? With Burks, Willis, or Ingram?
We can do Burks. Let's start with Burks.
Okay, cool. So I'll bring up some of Burke's stuff here. Make sure that I've got all of that set up here. Let me put that down. Share the screen. All right. And let's see if we can get this rolling. There we go. So let's start with that. And Alabama. All right.
So, like, the number one thing I always notice with Burks in the air, he's always controlling the situation. So that's one thing I noticed off the top with Burks, especially in this clip. The Alabama game in general. I mean, if you're on the fence about Burks or want to learn more about Burks's game, this is probably the best one to watch and from the recent season, in my opinion. What I love that he does is he understands the element of timing of when to move the defender in kind of a subtle enough way. He's not going to get called for an OPI. And that's what I really like about him when the ball's in flight. He played center fielder in high school, and you can kind of tell with how he tracks with how he tracks the ball and how he deals with contested situations like this, because he's able to contort enough, but able to move the defender out of the way towards the boundary in a way that's not egregious and gets himself enough space to make a play on the ball. So that's something I really like about Burks. And you see that all over his tape, especially when the ball's in flight. He's able to do that and use his frame. You know, he's 6'2", 225 pounds, and able to use his frame to do that. And it's funny, and you and I talked about a couple weeks ago, he played apparently at north of 235. Yeah. So you're getting a guy, if he, you know, at the NFL level, probably played between 230, 235. You know, that's a load to move when the ball's in the air, you know, if you're a defensive back, if you're trying to get in front of him, but he's able to wall off defenders and use his size to his advantage.
Yeah, I mean, I think those are great points when you see that, because, I mean, even here, the fact that, you know, we can talk, you know, technically there's things that you can look at like a play like this and say, okay, there's things he can sharpen up, but that's with all college players heading into the pros. You know, I mean, you know, he's looking back pretty early here, so he's kind of tipping that off. But the fact that he's able to continue accelerating, and like you said, use your hands just subtly, just, you know, get the hand on that elbow a little bit and turn and be able to turn back to the ball. And he's not leaping backwards, you know, as much as you see with a lot of guys. A lot of guys, when they leap late, they end up leaning backwards into the catch, and he's leaping more straight up and down, which is great because that helps him get that position. So that, like you said, that timing and you know, that timing, being able to get his hands free late and do it with a hand in his chest, that's nice.
No, yeah, I 100% agree. Yeah, it's interesting to see how he's deployed in Tennessee, if he's more on the boundary, more in the slot. But, you know, I think him being able to play the ball in the air is one of his strong suits.
Yeah, without a doubt. And I think he's gotten better with it throughout the years, because you see the technique sharpening up. You know, there were times like here, you know, yeah, he could attack it overhand, you know, but you see later as his career goes, he's getting better at attacking overhand as opposed to underhand here. But the positioning is he's still catching it with his hands for the most part here. So, I mean, I think there's a lot to build on with Burks, because like you said, with that size, even he's going to be able to, even against defenders who are, you know, more technically sound at the NFL level, his size and speed are going to be difficult for them to maintain position.
Right, 100%.
All right, so let's move on to the next one here with Burks. Let me find it here real quick. All right. All right, this looks like the same one. All right, so let me get back out of that. And let's see. Where are you? This one. All right.
Beautiful. So for me, when I watch Burks as an accelerator, this is where, you know, I just toss the combine out the window. I don't care, because what you watch for in early acceleration is watch the shin dropping. That's a really important indicator of an efficient accelerator. And this is what Burks has. And you see that a lot with guys like DK Metcalf, who are of similar stature. And that's a really good sign, especially for guys who want to be able to, you know, to either get vertical or threaten vertical. This is really important. He's 3 steps in, he's on the hip of the defender. And with the force that he's producing in those first 3 steps, he's going to be able to create enough space, like we kind of talked about earlier, to make a play on the ball. And that's going to be really important and instrumental in his growth and development as a receiver. Is if he can do this consistently enough, this is going to get DBs to think that he's going to, okay, the threat of Burks is pretty real here of getting deep, but his angles of operation, early acceleration, like pause it right there. You see how his back foot right there is underneath that hip, behind that hip. That means he is pushing and deploying all that force back so it can go forward. That's efficient acceleration, and those are really efficient angles. This is a mark of a really, really good play speed athlete. And this is what I love when I watch Burks down the field. He's able to do this with consistency, and this is what's going to really scare defensive backs, because he's going to get on their hip in a hurry and he has some of the best top end speed in the class, especially at 225, 230 pounds. But I mean, he's able to create those space with those angles, and obviously he can finish those plays if he gets enough space.
So let me ask you a question and we're going to go back to this point because I'm
sure
that's interesting here. Let me see if I can get to it. Like right there, that's a good example of that.
Yeah.
So I've always heard some coaches who are more football coaches as opposed to performance coaches. They'll talk about you want that lean, you want the pads over the knees, but is it automatically that if you get your pads over the knees that you're going to have a foot position like that, or is that more of a generalization? Like if we were going to really hone in on the point you made, which is such a good one, are there examples of people who may not be getting the maximum force, forward out of this, where they do have their head, their eyes up, their chin down a little bit, but their pads over their knees, but their feet aren't in a good position?
Yeah, you look at the torso angle when you look at that too. So what I like about his, like if you spotlight his face mask, he's looking horizontally, right? He's looking kind of down and out. That's what you want to be doing in early acceleration if you want to maximize your first 3 to 4 steps. Because as a receiver, especially when this is about a 15 to 17 yard play, this is what gets him the separation, is the first 3 steps of this. And his ability to, I like that he stutter steps and chains that into acceleration. That's really unique because a lot of athletes are just linear accelerators. It's a lot harder to do when you're chaining that like mini lateral to that linear acceleration, and you're able to push and continuously plant underneath that hip. Like this is a really, really fun angle right here. If you're creating that right there, go a little bit more forward. Yep, boom. So he's hitting the ground in a way where he's coming back underneath his center of mass with each step, which means he's going to continue to propel himself forward. That's really important. And he has the torso control and the trunk control as well to get himself into that position consistently. And even with contest, like we see, this is Kool-Aid right here, who's on him, putting his hand on his shoulder pad. He's able to do that and have that strength to continue accelerating even though he has hands on him. And that's really, really interesting when you talk about Burks. And we talk about the lack of nuance. This is nuance right here. This is hard to do, especially at a guy at his size. He's able to stabilize and continue to push up field. And those angles are just awesome to watch. From my perspective, being a track guy, these are really good angles for, a shorter guy like me. I'm like 5'9", 5'8" in a good day. That's great for me. We're talking about a 6'2", 230-pound wide receiver. That's fantastic.
Wow. Okay. That's really cool. I've never thought of that before from like when you're talking about certainly the earliest part of the acceleration I've certainly known about with receivers, but like what you talked about in terms of being able to do this double up to the outside and then be able to get into that position like that off of that double up being so important. Are there maybe some pro players that you could give an example of who are maybe they're within 15 pounds of Burks who do this well, and then maybe some guys who are within 15 plus or minus 15 pounds of Burks who didn't do this so well? Sure.
I think the number one is DK Metcalf, because I think he's probably the closest speed comparable when we talk about top end for a guy of Burks' stature. And then you kind of go the other route. I think of a guy like Mike Williams, who kind of struggles to essentially minimize his height. Because that's what you want to really do with those angles is you want those angles to be really, acute rather than obtuse, if you're a geometry person. So that's really what you look at in that perspective. But a guy like Metcalf is such a strong accelerator that this is one of the main reasons why he's able to reproduce force extremely quick and just get himself upfield at, he's a little bit bigger than Burks, probably like 6'3", 6'4", 230 plus, but similar in stature. But yeah, I mean, this is really unique for a taller athlete to be able to do this.
So is it when you're talking about the acute angle, is it Do a lot of athletes who come into your facility or that you've seen over the years who are making the transition, is part of the problem is that their footwork isn't efficient enough for them to be able to generate that force? Do they take too wide of a step? Is it that kind of some of the issue here? Because like it seems like this step off of the double up, he gets downhill very. It's a very tight angle, like you said, an acute angle downhill.
Right. I think a lot of it comes down to horizontal force production. So a lot of athletes. So I guess we're in the United States. So in Europe, athletes are trained to move efficiently. That's kind of a day one thing. In America, we're just trained to play our sport and just hope it works out. And that's kind of the difference, really.
Yeah.
European methodologies revolve around, the movement, the techniques and tactics. And, in America, it's let's just play our sport. It's like I liken it to AAU basketball versus, watching European basketball.
Makes sense.
Lot cleaner of a game in Europe, right?
Yeah.
Better movers, more efficient movers, but not as explosive movers. In America, we have explosive athletes who are just not technically clean. What I see from athletes a lot of times is they just come in underpowered or don't understand the utilization of that power, what that should look like from a technical, tactical standpoint, and how to use it on the field of play. That's a big one too, is having that power, having the engine is one thing. To control the Ferrari is a different beast, right?
Yeah.
So that's what I see a lot of.
That's awesome. This is really fascinating. Let's move on to the next one. And I think the next, you want to do Willis or Ingram here? I think that's where we're.
Yeah, we can do.
We have a third Burks, don't we?
Oh, we do. I think we have three each, right?
Yeah, we do. Here's a third.
Yeah,
Burks.
this is just a simple one. I think this is more of where I think he should be deployed early on in Tennessee is in the slot.
Yeah.
Because what he can do really well, he's super good at in breakers, because he can control what we call like situational velocity. He understands how fast he needs to be to get to X spot, right? And that's important for a guy his size, because he can use his length, his athleticism, and his just pure size of 230 pounds to wall off defenders in the middle of the field. You're going to have to put a bigger safety on him, because your normal size nickel corner is, hard pressed to deal with 6'2", 225.
Yeah.
With his acceleration capabilities. So this is, for me, I think, a big reason why I like the landing spot in Tennessee. This is kind of a Ryan Tannehill special.
Oh,
Ryan
for sure.
Tannehill's really good at throwing the ball in the middle of the field, really good in the short to intermediate areas. And this is where Burks is going to thrive early on as he transitions into more of a multi-dimensional threat, in terms of being a 3-level threat too, and playing X, Z, and in the slot. But I think early on, moving him around, either that movement Z role, that slot role, will be really important to kind of mix things up for him and get him going.
Oh, I think that's so dead on, and I think that's a combination of what he does well and what he's still learning. Because I do think
100%.
Because he gets flummoxed when guys press him. Like he has as Matt Bowen would say, he has the capability to become a good press athlete, but I think that his you see that the techniques are kind of lost on him on that level. Like he can use his feet. Sometimes he can use his arms, but combining them together, knowing the combinations of how to use them, and sometimes when they even play off man with him or play in his break path, you can see him try and run people over as opposed to really doing the thing. But he's that some of the positioning things, those are nuances that if he can continue to grow with it, I think he'll be in that position to be able to play multiple roles for the Titans and go from there. But that's definitely, I think that role makes perfect sense for him right now. And then hopefully they get Woods back and they get enough from
healthy Bobby Trees would be great for that offense. So.
Yes, without a doubt. So let's move on and let's see who was next. Who do you want to do next after this?
We could do Willis or Ingram or one of yours. Whatever you want to do is cool with me, man.
I think I've got. Let's just see who we've got pulled up real quick. Let's see. Oh, that's not the one I want to do. Let's do it this way. There we go. Let's do Willis.
Cool. All right, so Willis is a really fun player when you talk about his rushing upside. And we talk a lot about what Malik Willis can't do, but he's going to walk into the NFL as a top 2 rusher at the position at quarterback.
Yeah.
And I think it's just he's very multidimensional. When you talk about like Lamar Jackson, he's obviously first on that list, he's an explosive athlete. He's able to chain lateral linear really well, deep cuts, and he has really good top end speed, right? Hard to catch him. Malik Willis is a different blend, because when we talk about what Willis does really well we look at this Euro step he has. He does this pretty frequently in open space. And what I love about this, we saw this last year too. If you go back to, I like looking at his big games he plays, like against bigger competition, SEC caliber. Then he played Virginia Tech last year. He did this in the open field against them as well. And this is an extremely interesting maneuver against other high-level athletes, is when he's coming downhill here and the defender's trying to square him up, he's basically giving a left, right, left. And then he's able to work backwards. That's the really unique part, though. He's able to work semi-backwards towards the boundary in a curved linear fashion and accelerate again and not get caught by number 20 immediately. That's the uniqueness of Malik Willis. He is an extremely good accelerator, and in my opinion, he's a top 4, top 5 ball carrier, period, in this class. Because of that, he has just multidimensional solutions in the open field, and we'll kind of see later too. He plays really well in a phone booth, and for a quarterback to be I guess like a big part of a rushing offense, a rushing attack, that's got to be really important. Able to re-diagnose second-level defenders and also play well in that phone booth. We see how well Jalen Hurts does that too, especially the reading and reacting, especially what's going on at the line of scrimmage. But what Willis can do in the open field is, he's near Lamar Jackson level in terms of having that multitude of solutions in open space for sure.
Yeah, that makes total sense. That's great. That's great analysis. All right, well, let's go on to the next one, because I don't have anything. I'm not going to add to that. That's awesome. Let's see. We got that. Let's look at this one right here.
Oh, this is fun. I mean, to be able to diagnose and accelerate, to diagnose, decelerate, and accelerate again, just being able to see number 4, because number 4 is kind of coming in screaming here too, because he's a defensive back. He's coming in, and Willis can kind of feel that, but the ability to just stop, and then just after that continuation, get into acceleration. I love how he baits that with the wide angle. So look at what his left leg is doing and how low that shin is dropped. Yeah. And the right leg too. His right leg is ready to push and plant, but his left leg is in basically a dead decel. And he's able to re-accelerate out of that. Because then if you watch his angles too, watch that angle right off of that deceleration when he's continuing into acceleration. Watch how it's kind of similar to Burks here. Yeah. Right there. Boom. That angle's pushing under the hip, and he's gone upfield 10 12 yards. Needs to work on his sliding, but that's, that's all right. But, yeah, it's just unique, man, from a quarterback to be able to do that to an SEC-level athlete. When you watch that Ole Miss game, that's the takeaway I had. Yeah. Was I didn't care about the passing as much as a lot of people did, because the offensive line's overmatched. Schematically, they're overmatched. Their secondary far outweighs the production of Liberty's receivers. But my takeaway was, and my question going into this game and watching it live was, does Malik Willis belong as an athlete? And this question got answered right away in this game. The answer was a resounding yes, and he was a better athlete than any of those guys in the field that day, in my opinion, especially in open space. His ability just to stop, redirect, re-accelerate, and just get upfield and make something out of nothing really is important. He's going to be able to keep dead plays alive in the NFL, and I think that's going to be, I don't know, it's going to be interesting to see in the preseason. It might be this Matt Flynn, Russell Wilson situation where is Malik Willis going to get to a point in the preseason where they're going to say, Vrabel and company, and be like, is this kid too dynamic to keep off the field sometime in the near future? If he can learn the NFL offense, learn to read a defense, learn some of the things he needs to clean up from a tactical standpoint. I mean, this kid could very well be a star in this league. And I think it's a good situation for him in Tennessee for sure.
Yeah, and one of the things that I love about what you brought up here, this is something we're going to see with a number of the athletes, and I think you see with a lot of athletes, is that ability to just swivel your hips efficiently enough that when you can flip your hips and keep your feet in the ground or in a position where it's just very efficient without any additional steps, to be able to just get downhill like that. I mean, you see that with a lot of guys. We're going to see it with Trey McBride. I mean, and that's what really separates him as an athlete at his position. So yeah, those are some fantastic points with him. And yeah, I mean, we'll see. I mean, the big thing that has always been an issue for me with quarterback play is how fast they process information to action as throwers. So
right.
with Willis, that's going to be kind of the thing that, if he can do that, I totally agree. He can be a star, and even if he can't do that at a high level, and I'd say, guys, a good example of an athlete who didn't do that very well at a high level and had a long career was Alex Smith.
Yeah.
Alex Smith made a couple of Pro Bowls, I believe, with his production, and has helped them, certainly helped, was a good football player in the NFL. So, Willis is certainly a better mover than Alex Smith, who wasn't bad. By any stretch of imagination, he was pretty great.
He was athletic.
Yeah,
he was
exactly. So, if you say your midpoint with Willis, if you say the midline with him is Alex Smith, career-wise, that's not bad at all. That's great for a third-round pick, and that's where
100%.
That's where a lot of people wanted Alex Smith. Honestly, there were a lot of scouts had him as a third or fourth-round pick.
Yeah,
so
day two guy.
Yep, and instead of the number one overall guy, but hey,
yeah, no, I agree with you. I think it's I think Jalen Hurts is one career-wise we can kind of see, I guess, now in the NFL, because I think the Titans can develop their run game around Willis, which is what they want to do.
Yeah.
Which is a big part of, without Arthur Smith there now, I think they've realized, okay, Derrick Henry's kind of getting up there in age too. We have to help Derrick Henry out. And I think the number one way you can help Derrick Henry out is get him a running mate. And I think that's Malik Willis.
Yeah.
But we'll see. I mean, I'm excited to see what the kid can do.
So what do you think the difference is going to be? Like, I was a big Lamar Jackson fan coming out. I can't tell you that I wasn't high on Willis, but I certainly respect the skills that he brings to the table and where that upside could be. Like, I think you outlined that perfectly, and you've got to account for that and believe, and there's a real possibility that works out. But what's been interesting to me is it seems obvious to me, as someone who liked Jackson, I look at Wilson and go, I can see how the Titans would want to use a lot of what the Ravens do. But where do you think it would be different? Because Willis certainly has a far more powerful arm in terms of the velocity, and that means that the perimeter throws will be a factor. But how does that impact how they might want to set up the run game? Is it going to be similar, you think, with stretching the field horizontally with the quarterback and then pounding it up the middle with the running back and giving that vertical horizontal stretch based on the quarterback running back bind? Or is it there? What else is there that you think that could be going on there?
I think it's kind of two-pronged. I think the first thing we talk about Malik Willis versus Lamar Jackson, I think it's just pure experience. Lamar Jackson was a 3-year starter at Louisville, correct? I think if my mind kind of goes there. Willis started really 1.5, 2 seasons essentially with COVID, but 2 full seasons I think at Liberty. So that's the difference. I think is experience. I think in terms of decision making, they both make terrible decisions sometimes. They make decisions you're like, why are you throwing it there? But at the same time, they're talented passers. I do agree when you talk about like forced production from an arm standpoint. Malik Willis has a rocket launcher with an arm.
Right.
Doesn't know how to use it though. So, and that's the thing is like the pinpoint accuracy and that stuff needs to, still needs to improve. But with Lamar Jackson, he's gotten better as a passer, but he hasn't needed to that much because of how good he is as a runner. It's not just him as a runner pure, it's the threat of Lamar Jackson as a runner. And we talk about setting that up. I think the quarterback running back bind's a big one. And you have one of the best interior rushers in the game in Derrick Henry. But what you also have is you look at the safety play. What is it going to do to the safety play with Treylon Burks as a deep threat? You're going to get a lot of one-on-one opportunities if a safety sneaks down over the top. And I think it's going to open up their vertical passing attack because the threat of a 34-year-old Ryan Tannehill doesn't really scare you.
Right.
The threat of 23, 24-year-old Malik Willis definitely does. And I think that's the difference is I don't think Tennessee's going to win many games with Ryan Tannehill throwing the ball 35, 40 times. And I think Malik Willis is a good bridge to that of what they want to do. Sort of how, the Philadelphia Eagles handled Jalen Hurts last year. He was leading rusher. They had no running back. But imagine that situation with a Derrick Henry-esque, player. I think that's going to be interesting to see if they put him on the field for that right away, if Ryan Tannehill's struggling, because it's a different passing offense. You don't have A.J. Brown. Your best playmaker is a rookie. So I don't know. I think it's going to be interesting to see. But, yeah, I'm pretty bought in on the idea of Willis developing into a pretty damn good player. But we'll see if they extend Tannehill. That's going to be a big part of it too.
Yeah, and to me, just right off the bat, when I look at this offense, if I were creating an offense for these guys, I would think, all right, you've got your north-south stretch and your off-tackle, type of plays to Henry. You've got the threat of Willis to the outside, basically running keepers that are essentially like toss plays. Sure. To the outside, QB sweeps, things like that. Occasionally draw plays when you spread the field. But then you have the element of when you brought in Robert Woods. Let's forget Treylon Burks for a minute. But you bring in Robert Woods, who's one of the most versatile wide receivers in the game. And when healthy, he's excellent not only as a blocker, but also as a runner himself.
In the run game,
Yes. Mm-hmm. So you get those fly sweeps, you get those jets and have him run end arounds, but you can also have him block for Burks. And so you have these plays where essentially you don't know whether Henry's getting it, whether Burks is getting it outside, whether Burks is getting it to the right side and Willis is going to the left, or whether Burks is getting it to the outside or Robert Woods is getting it to a side. And then that creates all the RPOs and all the outside types of throws. To me, like the short passing game is where like Willis will thrive immediately. And using all of these different avenues to force defenses to play both sides of the field. It's not just like they're guessing, is it going to be inside or outside, but it's going to be which side to the outside.
Right. It's going to be tough it's tough to decipher because there's playmakers all over in that offense now. If you add Willis into the mix, it's a completely different unit.
Yeah.
In terms of what you can do. But yeah, you hit the nail on the head.
Yeah.
Bobby Trees is like, that's the thing too, is when he was in that role he was in 2 years ago, he was a big part of the rushing attack.
Yes.
Huge, especially on jet motion in particular. Orbits too, like just getting the ball in space. He's not a super dynamic in space player, but extremely high level decision maker, and that made a lot of difference in that Rams offense.
Yeah, and another guy that we're not even really considering, or we haven't talked about yet, is the rookie Chigo Okonkwo.
Yes, the Jonnu Smith role.
Yes, very much, or Delaney, or either one of those guys. He has that. Certainly you can use him as a runner. He has. There's some effectiveness there. So if you get the defense, if you catch the defense overplaying one side, he could be that guy going to the opposite, pretty quickly. And you've seen some red zone rushes from him that have been real positive. So yeah, that's a fascinating discussion going through here. Yeah, I mean, that's ridiculous. That is certainly Lamar Jackson, Michael Vick, ridiculous skill. I always call it, I mean, it's not a technical term, but I've always called when you're in a hole it's kind of like altering the axis of pursuit. You got the pursuit heading to the left, and with the flip of the hips, you just completely change that axis right there.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. I mean, and that's the thing I wrote down when I was, watching this play. I watched it live, then I had to go to YouTube a few days later and rewatch the game. And I'm like, this is really important if you're an NFL evaluator and looking at how well he reads contact in a phone booth. This is a mess right here.
Right.
I mean, this one defender, two defender, three defender, four defender, five defenders, 6 and 7 defenders right now that are either softly blocked or unblocked. Willis has the ability to redirect in this linear path. You see how when he plants off his left foot when he comes up to the 10-yard line, he can go directly linear. This is super important.
Yes.
He just gets downhill immediately. And that's just really rare from not just a quarterback, but from most ball carriers cannot do that, especially at 220 pounds. That's another thing. He's a big boy. I mean, this is not, he's not 205 pounds, 200 pounds. He's a 220-pound quarterback. And his ability to just shift his weight and able to negate contact from all these defenders, then do it again in open space. I mean, this is why if you can use him in the quarterback run game like you did Jalen Hurts, he has the upside of 800, 900 rushing yards in the league if he starts. I mean, this is just ridiculous play. I mean, this kind of, I could turn it off after this and say I don't have questions about him as an athlete because this isn't, this is remarkable stuff.
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, a remarkable running back, obviously, on all accounts, was Adrian Peterson, but he lived and died by the jump cut. And in a situation like this, when he's heading downhill like this, he would jump and probably be another yard downhill before he could make a lateral cut. This is a nice little job of, like you said, flipping the hips. He points that outside toe, flips his hips, pivots off of that, that left foot. And, I mean, when he decides to make that move, he basically covers a yard to do that. That's so efficient.
Yeah, and that's what efficient's a really good word to describe him as a rusher is nothing's forced. There's not a lot of mistakes. It's just really efficient and explosive. Like he has an element of power to his game that none of these clips kind of cover. But I mean, I've seen him run dudes over. I've seen him, use a stiff arm. I mean, he can bring it. Obviously, Mike Vrabel might just say get down, but he's a guy who can take on a linebacker, and he has good contact integrity in terms of understanding contact types, understanding what tools to use when.
Yeah.
He's not just like a say a guy like a Trey Lance, for example, like really good. I think he's a good runner.
Yeah.
But he doesn't do that type of stuff well. It's like you gotta get down. Like he just that's the difference between a guy like Willis and Lance as a runner is that the part of understanding contact types, contact integrity, and what tools to use when. But that's what makes him a unique prospect here.
Lance is more of like a higher end Marcus Mariota, where he's got good linear speed, or even Robert Griffin, where it was like good linear speed. There's no straight line, but Lance has that Steve McNair kind of heft to him to be able to drop the pads and run you over. But you don't want that because you don't want my favorite player ever's career and the way that went, where he's like being held together by duct tape for half of his career. We
could talk for an hour about Robert Griffin III. But
So
that's brutal.
Yes, but like when you look at this, this is absolutely different. This is more, this is more on that Vic Jackson scale there. And I mean, just how low he's getting here.
Just look at the angles.
Yeah, look at the shin like that, just parallel off the ground.
That shin is completely horizontal.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, it's unique. I mean, this is stuff you just don't see from the position very often, which is one of the reasons why I'm like, this guy could, the sky's the limit if he can figure it out. But you don't know what you don't know. So
Yeah.
we'll find out. But I mean, I just like this type of stuff because it's unique for the position.
Yeah, and I certainly agree. I mean, it's hard not to. It's hard not to love the athletic ability and the potential of what can happen here.
For sure. For sure. Oh, yeah. Can we talk about athletic ability too? A guy like Keontae Ingram, I think, just went really overlooked throughout this whole process. And when you looked at his early career tape at Texas, it was littered with plays like this.
Yeah.
Where just the ability to create in a multidimensional way, catch the ball cleanly, makes one guy miss, spin move on the safety.
Yep.
Then is able to drop his pads, get through another defender, and get an extra 10 to 12 yards. Like this is really good stuff. And this is kind of the potential he has as a 3-down back. I think his pass catching skill set is one of the best in this class.
Yep.
I don't think it gets talked about enough, especially I think his ability to track through contest, that's huge. And he can do that really well on wheel routes and seams. But I just love his 3-down skill set and his ability to play well in open space, really broad movement toolbox. But I think he lands in a good situation in Arizona too, where it's really just James Conner.
Yeah.
Eno Benjamin's a fun player in space, but he's not the inside threat that a guy like Conner brings or a guy like Ingram brings as well. I think Ingram's a bit more dynamic than Conner.
Oh, yeah.
And that's one, too, in the passing game. I think getting him in space, being able for those two to play off each other, really important. And Ingram's still 225 plus pounds, weighed 235 at Texas. And that's one of the things that jumped out to me, too, is, you have a guy who's rostered at 235 doing this in the open field. Like, that's pretty impressive.
Yeah. And there's a lot of little things that I love about what he does here. And, I often call a lot of these things micro movements. Because there are little things that just allow you to avoid contact or set up angles. The spin's nice here. Watch the foot right here. Watch how he gets the knees high and kicks that back foot. The best backs, whether it's Marshawn Lynch, Alvin Kamara is great at this.
Yep.
When you get that heel to your ass, when you're trying to avoid a defender, that helps you avoid backside pursuit because you're lifting that foot up, and he's kind of doing that. He sees the defender's angle, and you see him kick that foot up, knowing that the defender's going to be behind him. And so for me, and then again, he understands how to use his pads, how to use that front arm as kind of a bumper away from your frame. Like you keep that arm out as like a bubble and let them hit the arm, not your body. And then you can drive through that. I love this kid. It's funny. Like I'm in one Devy league, and this is the guy I drafted last June.
I did too. I drafted him 2 years ago.
Yeah. See,
hoping.
Exactly, and it's just like you keep watching his game, and I'm totally in agreement with like. Eno Benjamin to me is like 90 proof LaShawn McCoy, but that temper, that's
a really good way to put it.
That's like my nickname for him.
That's a really good way to put it. That's really funny.
That's kind of the nickname I gave him when I wrote him up in the RSP, is that he's 90 proof LaShawn McCoy, and so yeah, he's fun, but he hasn't convinced anybody of anything in 2 years.
No, clearly not. So it's no.
Yeah, but this, to me, you've got elements of Kareem Hunt and Chris Ivory to his game. He's a relentless runner. He's a versatile runner. The Notre Dame game with him at USC is a great example of all these skills.
Yeah, especially against a pretty good defense too.
Yeah.
And yeah, I know, I 100% agree. He reminded me a lot of Alex Collins.
That's a nice one.
His ability to to cut, to be abrupt, but have a broader toolbox than you would think at his size. But yeah, I love this kid. I think he's in a good situation too. So we'll see.
Yeah, I totally agree. I'm hoping I get him in a lot of leagues. So
I know.
Yep. Okay, so we're gonna move forward here, and we're gonna look at 3 more players. And let's see, what do I have up here? Those I can X out of, and let's X out of this, and see what I have All right. I'm gonna have to pull up some stuff real quick. Let's see.
Cool.
Let's pull up this. All right. Let's look up McBride, because now I've just kind of run through and I pulled up a number of things, but like we can kind of go through some of these quickly. The thing that I like about McBride, let's see, starting off, the way he's able to get his feet up. I mean, when you have a player his size and the pad level drop, the ability to keep your feet in situations like this and be able to alter your stride where your hips are flexible enough when defenders hit at your legs, and you're able to kind of, reorient your position with your feet like that. And just have that hip and leg flexibility at that size. You don't see that on a lot of tight ends.
No, you definitely don't. I think after the catch, a lot of times when I watch him, he reminds me of a bit of Cole Kmet. Like, he always seems to get more than you think he should. Kmet's a little bit stiffer as a mover. There's a lot more fluidity, and you use the term flexibility too. With a guy like McBride, he's a lot more like pliable, if that makes sense. And that's like kind of last year, my pliable mover of the year award went to Najee Harris.
Yeah.
Because it's a guy who's 240 pounds, is like a bull and a ballerina meshed into one. So I see that same stuff with McBride. I think he's gonna help out after the catch more than we think. And I think that's a big reason why.
Yeah, and to me, when I see backs, or I almost call it two guys who are what's going on? There we go. Two guys who they also kind of some backs and receivers are really good at displacing their I don't know how to call it, but it's like almost like a displacement of their lower body to avoid contact. And he has a little bit of that. Like Darren Sproles was the king of it. And so was Marshawn Lynch. Like they could move one leg back while they were taking a hit and then bring it back around to the side. And it was just like anybody who has that. Chubb has that as well. Yep. And this is, this is an example of a definitely a tight end who has some of that in his toolbox.
Yeah, he could, and being like you kind of hit the nail on the head. I mean, being able to negate contact, is so important in the NFL, because these guys are going to hit you. I mean, these are professional football players. I mean, but being able to negate that's super important. Yeah,
look at the bend of the knee. Even though he falls down because he gets chopped with good height or decent enough height, look at the bend of the like almost like a hurdler, But he turns that leg inside. It's not just
right, and that's also important too, because you think about negating contact, negating injury, also huge. If that front foot stays linear, stays vertical, that's not going to be good. But being able to negate contact in that facet, where I've seen plays like this from Ezekiel Elliott, was a huge one.
Yes,
and he was a really good hurler coming to Ohio State, so that was that's a little bit different. But being able to chain that into something else when you hit the ground.
Yeah.
Like that's a mark of a pretty good athlete, being able to prepare for the next thing, basically.
Yeah.
So I agree with you there.
Yeah. And to me, that's the thing. When I see guys who show this level of awareness to make that smaller adjustment, I'm like, this is a great mover, or a very good mover who understands and just processes information fast enough and has enough of a toolbox to work with, that that if he clears this, you're going to see there's other plays on his tape everywhere, maybe not today, but there are other plays that you see where he's able to maintain his footing in ways that you wouldn't expect for him. But another one for me is just this. Let's see that one I didn't need to really show much of, but this is, again, the example of the hips. Just being able to, a lot of receivers, and especially tight ends, when I see big guys being able to just kind of catch and turn through the catch point and get downhill like that, I'm a fan.
Yeah, nothing looks forced. I mean, that's a big thing. When you look at bigger guys like that, nothing looks forced.
Yeah.
That's a huge one for me. Is it a turning ship? Or was it on the, what I mean? So that's the
Yeah.
difference is, like in next year's class, you have, a bigger version of that in Michael Mayer. But that's a really good point. I mean, that's really, really important when you're looking at these guys, especially high-level tight ends, being fluid in everything they do while having that element of force that they need for the position.
Yeah, here's another example of just where, whenever he's hit, you just see him trying to take his lower legs a little higher or away from the contact. And I'm a fan of that. I just think that, there are a lot of situations where it's just not going to work like this. But you see the effort, and you see it in the open field a lot where he's in the middle of the field and he's actually getting yards after that. And this is a fun play because watch the feet. What I love about this play is this is a delayed screen. He's off the left side. And let's see if I can get this to work the way. Just the turn of the hips it's a really sharp angle to break across the inside here. And then just the chopping of the strides each time he stiff arms, so he maintains his base of power. And then again the feet. Let's see if I can show it one more time here. I'll slow it down a little bit. Use the old projector style here.
Love it. Love it. At the old school.
Yeah. But just see how the stride just gets very choppy.
Yeah, and watch how his hips deviate path to the boundary. I mean, that's a really, really good job by him by preparing to negate the contact. It's one thing to do it when the collision happens, another to prepare for it. But yeah, I think, when we're talking about him as an athlete, he's one of the better pure athletes. Because you see how that comes. You see how he kind of bows out slightly.
Yeah.
That disrupts the pathing decision from the defender because the spacing is different between defender to the ball carrier. So, but yeah, I like what he does, man. He's a fun player to watch because he's a better athlete than you think. I think he's one of those better than you think players.
Yes.
Where like everything he does is just better than you think it is.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm excited to watch him too in that offense in Cardinals.
Yeah, so let's see what we got. Let's see if there's anything else here this is just let's see if we quickly do this. This is another nice little example of when you being able to, again, displace your weight a little bit and know that as you're getting hit right here, to instead of trying to just lean back through it, just saying, all right, I'm going to give up some of that momentum that's forcing me back towards the quarterback and just bring my feet up right here and just kind of plant off of that and focus more on turning my hips. Like use the defender's momentum against him.
Right.
All right, so let's see. I think that's enough of McBride. You just see, again, the hip flexibility, the feet. Now we got a little Tyrion Davis-Price. And I think what's interesting about him is you're going to see him in a gap game. Obviously he's playing a lower division opponent in McNeese State. But in terms of the things that he can control, what I value about him is footwork and pad level. Right here, when he gets downhill, how low the pads are, the arm out, he keeps the head up enough, and he's forcing the defender with the forearm shiver as opposed to just leaning the shoulders in there.
Yeah, you know what? When I watch his game, it's a little bit of Marion the Barbarian.
Yeah,
it's just the ability to get downhill and attack. He's your prototypical thumper. He's going to get you yards after contact. And I like how you said in gap scheme, he's just get him downhill.
Yeah.
Like just get him downhill and let him wear down a defense. And that's an element that the Niners don't really have right now.
Yeah.
I think Mitchell's a fantastic zone back with the ability to, break a big play at any time now that Mostert's gone. But I think he can kind of fill the role that they wanted Trey Sermon to fill.
Yeah.
And Sermon was a pretty good zone runner too, coming out of OSU, but I think they're going to be going a little more gap scheme with Davis-Price. Just get him downhill and let him punish people. I mean,
and
it's just fun to watch.
Yeah, and honestly, I think Sermon is the thing about Sermon, and someone's asked me about this because I was very high on Sermon last year.
Yeah, for sure.
And is that Sermon's the most patient runner of that group, and he's very good at being able to be able to press and change direction in tight space, but in the Niner scheme with that outside zone and with toss, they're very much like, listen, we've got Kittle, we've got Williams, we've got good blocking receivers, and we've got Juszczyk. We're going to open highways. So get downhill as fast as you can, get to that crease as fast as you can, hit it hard, and I think that with Sermon is used to being more of a patient runner and setting up creases, and he doesn't have the level of speed that Mitchell does. So like, whereas I see Mitchell being a less precise runner than Sermon. Sermon's not a good fit for what the 49ers want to do. And so when they say something to the effect of, he's more tentative, or he's not, or Sermon's more tentative, or he has things to work on, I think that at the end of the day, if you put Trey Sermon in Pittsburgh, if you put Trey Sermon, he doesn't need to be there. But if you put him in Pittsburgh, you put him in Cleveland, you put him in some teams that had a more diversified attack with a little bit more patience, I think he would pay off for a team. But if you say, listen, we're going to open creases, we want you to hit them hard, and if they're not there, we still want you to hit them hard. Use your speed, right. Get downhill. Well, Mitchell's good at that. And certainly Davis Price, like you said, he is that thumper. I think it's a great point about Davis Price is he understands also how to control his pacing well within gap where it's not, he's not really slowing down, but he alters his stride just a little bit. Yeah. And we're going to see a couple of those plays with him. Like this is a good example of him just controlling with a step. Like that little stutter right there. Set up that crease exactly how you want it.
Yeah, this is going to be, a thunder and lightning tandem, I think, with him and Mitchell. I think Mitchell's obviously going to be the lead back there, and I think Mitchell's proved, too, in the latter half of that season, he can handle pass-catching duties as well, which is going to be nice for them.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I think – we're talking about a guy around the goal line to take some wear and tear off of Mitchell because he, had a few injuries his rookie season, I should say.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think this is where, we're going to see Davis Price thrive, is just getting downhill and wearing out defense because there's a wear you down unit.
Yes.
With Kittle and Williams. Good Lord, Juszczyk. They punish people. And that's their brand of football, especially with, getting more of the QB run game going with Trey Lance. This is going to be really fun offense to watch, and one that's more centered around the run than it wasn't, I think, in years past in terms of diversity.
Yeah, totally agree. And this is Khalil Shakir, and this is kind of the same type of thing you see with how well he can get downhill after the catch. And again, being able to do it efficiently. Here's the crosser. Nice little stop-start movement through there.
Yeah, I like Shakir a lot. Actually, I think he's a pure slot. I think he can transition outside a bit as well. But he reminds me of like an in-control Dante Pettis.
Yeah.
And I love Dante Pettis coming out too because he was just so dynamic. It's an incredibly gifted athlete in terms of what he can do in terms of from an angler perspective, but obviously that didn't really pan out from more so for character reasons than anything.
Yeah.
But I think Shakir kind of has that in control a bit more. But yeah, I think he fills a role for that Buffalo offense.
Yeah, I think so too. And because you look at Davis, and Davis is a nice player, but I think he's a limited player in terms of how you use him.
Right.
And he needs to be that second or third read, whereas I think Shakir can be your first read player with certain types of looks.
Sure. And I agree. I think Gabriel Davis is a vertical athlete.
Yeah.
And that is okay in that passing game, with Stephon Diggs being the focal point. But I think you need someone over the middle of the field like Cole Beasley was there. But I think Shakir can be a Cole Beasley plus in terms of role because Cole Beasley was just short to intermediate areas.
Yeah.
Didn't really offer you much down the field with his skill set. But I think Shakir can offer that too, especially when he develops.
Yeah, without a doubt. So see if we, I mean, you know, what you see here is a lot of just hand-eye coordination plays and, you know, very nice tracking and being able to do it outside your frame.
Yeah, the away from frame stuff is really important, I think, especially for rookies to be able to see the field early on. I mean, that's just because that's going to happen in the NFL. You know, you're not going to get perfect balls because coverage is going to be pretty damn good. So you're going to have to make those plays with consistency if you want to see the field and see your role progress for sure.
Yeah, without a doubt. So yeah, I mean, you can see that, you know, as a receiver, I like the willingness to be physical at the end of plays. You know, the movement skills are nice in terms of being able to adjust your stride, being able to make the spins, you know, do it in tight spaces, you know, winning the ball. Certainly all things, you know, that I feel good about in terms of his ability to take contact. And yeah, probably more of a pure slot who can be a big play slot for you.
Yeah.
And that's where I think with Davis, you know, you see with Davis, he needs a lot of runway to work across the middle. And he's not like you said, he's not a great horizontal mover.
No, I think he's a level 3 player. He's going to play in that third level of defense, and that's how he's going to win. Like, he'll have games when it's going to be, you know, 4 for 120 and 2, but he'll also have games that's 2 for 15.
Yeah.
Like, that's just the type of player he is. Like, he's not going to be a second level winner because Stephon Diggs is going to be the one that's going to take the pressure off of him to get him one-on-one looks.
Yes.
He's also not a great separator at the line of scrimmage. No. So his looks, I think, are predicated off of defenses keying on Stephon Diggs
and Knox
and Dawson Knox up the seam too. Oh, that's a big one too because he's gonna be a really good seam player for them this year too because he's a fast tight end.
Yeah,
and he plays the ball well in the air. So it's a fun offense to watch. But I think Shakir definitely has a longer term role there. I think as the potentially second guy in that offense long term.
Yeah, I agree. Well, this has been a lot of fun, Brandon. I mean,
yeah, no, I've enjoyed this. It's been fun.
Yeah,
thank you.
So, tell people where they can find your work and where they can find you on social media.
Yeah, first, Matt, thank you so much, man. It's been a lot of fun chopping up with you. You know, we had a call a couple weeks ago, and we were both pretty excited to do this. So,
without a doubt.
Would love to jump on with you again. This is a ton of fun, man.
Oh, we will.
Couldn't think of a better way to spend a Saturday afternoon for sure. But in terms of where you can find me, at Angelo_fantasy on Twitter. My DMs are always open if anyone wants to pop in, have questions, and you can check out my content on my website at angeloanalysis.com. But thank you again, man. This is a ton of fun. I really appreciate it.
Oh man, it's a pleasure. And of course, the RSP post draft is out. It is available at mattwaldman.com. You get that for $21.95. You get the pre-draft home with it as well, and the newsletter that comes out from June through December, updating you on shows like this that are going to be out on YouTube and prospects that I'll be looking at for 2023, as well as what I think about some of the 22 and other prospects from earlier years and how they're developing that haven't gotten their shot as of now. So thanks again for listening, folks, and tuning in, and have a great weekend.